Good morning and welcome to the live Q&A here in the Manager Critic group. For those who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm the founder of a company called Step by Step Listening. And during January and February, we're talking about ways to improve our listening skills. And my purpose and intention always is to help you to question yourself and the world in order that you can get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen. But also clarity of who you are and confidence to be you without apology. So welcome, and today's part 2 of how to improve listening skills is all about coaching listening. So if you missed last week's video, please do go back and look at it. It's counselling listening, and that's where we're listening to what's not working, what didn't work, what isn't working. And every human being needs to have that part of their story honoured, and we can get stuck in it, okay? So the reason I'm sharing these different kinds of listening, I talk about it in Manage the Critic, the book about the 7 kinds of listenings that I have discovered so far that I have or I know about that work for me. And counselling is, it's really important that we get our story heard. It's important that our pain, the sadness, the hurt, the angers, that they have a space where we can express it and it's honoured and it's respected as how we feel right now. It doesn't matter whether somebody else thinks we should be feeling like that, but it's really important that we get listened to. So that's counselling listening. That's what I call, and I sometimes call it in everyday conversation when I'm having a download. So there'll be times when you just need to talk about what's not working and you don't need anything else happening on the outside other than somebody holding that space and just honour it. And I want to say a huge thank you to Sasha. One, because you've introduced somebody to the group, so a really big thank you for that. 2, because you shared a story last week about how you applied the learning from the counselling listening and already started to notice a shift in your relationship with your daughter. So thank you for your contribution. Every time we share something, whether it's what's not working and what is working, we increase our awareness, we increase our knowledge. So somebody's with me today, please do say hello. I can see one live, just pop hello to God so I know who you are. So counselling is about what doesn't work. So coaching listening, and I want to talk to you about this because there's lots of different coaches out there. There's an abundance of us, and I want you to be able to identify what is coaching, when do you need it, when do you provide it, because I believe that every single person on the planet is a coach. You might not like that if you've got a preconceived idea of what you think coaching is, but ultimately a coach is somebody, I call it in the book, is a comfortable vehicle for a long journey. So a coach is somebody that asks questions that's going to take you from where you are now to where you want to be. Counselling listening is about listening about what's happening in the now and what's happened in the past. And so quite often if you go to a coach, you may get coaches that will be get frustrated or agitated because they want you to be solution focused, they want you to be goal setting. So you go and get a coach ultimately when you are sick of the story. All right, if you have been saying the same thing over and over again. Now, there's 2 things to remember here. If you've been telling the story over and over again, but it kept getting interrupted. So your friends go, yeah, but you ought to do this or you should do that. Or your friends say, interrupt and go, oh yeah, I remember when I felt like that. So you're telling your story and then they start talking about their story. You may end up keep telling your story over and over again because it actually, the whole of it hasn't been heard. All right. So I want you to be kind to yourself. I want you to acknowledge that maybe the whole of it hasn't been heard. And one of the reasons I work with Karen Williams and the Book Mentor is because what I've discovered in working with clients is writing a book means that you can tell some more of your story in detail. Okay, so it's important that your story gets heard. But you employ a coach usually when you have heard your story over and over again and you are sick of it. Because what happens in our relationships, our personal relationships, is as a human being, it's really tough, one, listening to a friend or family member in pain. It's really tough listening, feeling like there's nothing you can do to help, there's nothing you can do to change it. So you might keep making suggestions and it doesn't make them feel any better, it doesn't go anywhere. And so what happens is if it's family members or friends and you're the one that's doing the listening, consciously or unconsciously, you start avoiding them. Because it becomes that listening to them doesn't seem to be making any difference. It doesn't seem to be helping. Or you, if you're the one that's downloading your story, you tend to avoid these other people. You stop going because you think, God, every time I turn up, all I do is talk about the same old thing. And I know for me, when I was going through, my first marriage was on its rocks, and about 4 or 5 years, I would show up at people's houses and I would go, and he's done this and he's done that, I can't believe he's done this, and I'd be telling my story and I'd be going on about it. And it was only actually when someone said to me, it was actually my sister-in-law, she said, I said something like, you know, if I'm this unhappy at New Year, I'm going to leave. And she said, Cheryl, do you realise that you've been saying that for 4 years? When are you going to leave? And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because I didn't actually realise that that much time had been elapsed, and I didn't realise I was stuck in my story for so long. So it's good to talk about the past. It's good to talk about what's not working. And there's a point where we go, I'm sick of it. And the challenge you've got is, if you are sick of somebody else's story, you have to get their permission. So I want to talk about that today. So coaching is asking questions that switch your focus from what's not working to what you'd like to have happen. So the question I use is clean language. And the reason I love clean language is because it asks you, what would you like to have happen? And depending on how you process time, how your mind is operating, you can answer it very freely. So you might say, something, I want to be free of this, I want to be happier, I want to be loved, and it has no time frame, there's no time allowed on it. Now, traditional coaching, that if you go to a traditional coach, they may say to you, what do you want to have happen in the next year, or the next 90 days, or next 30 days? And there's a whole load of reasons why some people cannot visualize in the future, and particularly if we're in trauma, if we're bogged down in our story about what's not working. All the blood has come from our clarity brain, it's in our survival brain, we're not thinking particularly clearly, and to visualize in the future is nearly nigh on impossible. And so there is a process that we have to go through to switch our mind from talking about what's not working into what is working. So I'm teaching you to coach yourself right now, and I want you to be aware that what tends to happen is I teach people this stuff and then they go and practice it on somebody else. So I want you to be really aware that if somebody's telling you a story about what's not working, and you are the one that's got sick of listening to the story, or just because you're finding it difficult, you feel useless, you feel you can't help them, then what I will say to you is, you say to them, look, you can repeat back and say, I've heard you said this and you've done this, and I've met you the last couple of times, and it's the same thing happening, and I really feel for the pain, and I want to be able to help. You could ask them, how can I best support you? And actually they might turn around and say, I just need you to keep listening to me. And that you may have to be, as the friend, the one that's willing to listen until they're sick of it. All right, so that's one option. Two, you may listen until, and then you might have to set boundaries and say, look, I understand that you need to tell this story again and again. I understand that it's really, really bad for you. I remember one friend was staying with me for 9 months, and every day she would come in and tell me all about how terrible it was, and she was going through a really tough time. She was going through divorce. It felt like she was disconnected from her children, felt very isolated, and I knew I was the only one that she was kind of really talking to about this stuff, so I knew I needed to listen. But there was a point after about 6.5 months that she was living with us, I said to her, look, okay, I get it's tough, but now this is for me, not for you. You may be quite happy listening and talking about that story, and you may need and want to talk about it longer. But for me to listen to you, I now need you to walk in and tell me at least one thing that's working in your life. Or I need you to tell me one thing that you'd like to have happen, something you're working towards to take you away from all this pain. And I was very clear that I was asking her to do that, not because she needed to move out of her story, but I needed to listen to something different. And there's a big difference there. So I want you to be aware of that, because what can happen is you can start trying to make people happy, trying to make people see the positive stuff, make people go to a solution. And it's not because it's the best thing for them. It's because you don't have the resources to listen to what's not working for much longer. And that's okay. It's part of being human. That's part of being connected to people, because it's part of caring about them, but it's also about caring for yourself and looking after your own well-being. So good morning, Lorna. Thanks for joining me. So once you've got it clear with them and you're clear on your purpose and intention, so I always say to people, we're chatting with the purpose of being curious about what they've got to say, and we're very clear on the outcome that we want. So I would be saying to them that I really would love you to talk about stuff that's working in your life and what's working. And I'm happy to listen to the stuff that's not working, but my purpose and intention is because it hurts me to keep seeing and hearing you upset. And I want to be able to do that because I understand it's important, but I also want to hear what's working, because I don't believe that there's nothing at all in your life that's not working. That's what I would do with my friends. So this yourself, if you're now sick of your story, And then there's two questions I want to leave you with today. Is the question, and I will type them up in the top as well in a minute, is that the question I always start with is, what would you like to have happen? So I'm going to ask you that question, and if you are prepared to, I sound like one of those cartoons, if you are prepared to participate, please put your outcome below. What would you like to have happen? Now, coaching listening is about asking questions now that change people's focus from what's not working and what didn't work and what they don't want to what they do want. But when you train to listen to people, this is what Master Your Critic's all about. The retreat that we run in Spain, we're going to run in Spain this year, is about you developing your ability to ask better questions, but also understanding that when you ask a question, you have to calibrate based on how that individual answers, because depending how they are, what's happening in the world, whether they've had their story heard, even if you ask them what they want to have happen, they could tell you all about that story again, just because it hasn't been properly heard yet. So if you have got people like that, be kind to them. If it is you, be kind to yourself, because your story is important. But now, if you're telling the same story over and over, you need to start listening to it really, really carefully. You need to stop doing it at surface level. You need to get into the detail of it, because there is a message in amongst it somewhere that you're not hearing. And it's important for you to slow down and listen to it. So you ask the question, what would you like to have happen? And one of the models we use when we train is called the PRO model, so that people will generally answer with one of three answers. They'll tell you the problem all over again. They'll give you a remedy. So they'll give you the thing that they don't want. So I don't want to keep going around in circles. I don't want to feel stuck. I don't want to argue anymore. I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to, because that's a remedy. That's the thing that they don't want it, because when they haven't got that, it will give them something else. So if you find yourself answering on your outcomes with what you don't want, the question I would ask you is, so when you don't have that thing, so when you don't have misery, you're not misery, when you don't have, I can't remember the other ones I mentioned now, but if you don't have that thing, the question I ask you is, so when you don't have it, then what happens? And those questions, my intention is always to put your attention on, what do you want? Okay? So eventually you'll get the outcome that you want. That's the solution. So that's why I'm called the Strength and Solution Detective, because my questioning technique is about getting clear about what you do want. Now, I would say 85 to 90% of my clients, particularly when they come to me because they want clarity and they want confidence and they want something to change, is it will take a few questions to actually get us to actually state it as an outcome of what we want. However, if I am working with a client who is on the wealth balance profile and they're on the steel energy and they naturally like to and explore what doesn't work, or maybe their full story has never been heard, and maybe they don't really understand what it is that's not working, some people do need to explore what's not working first. And so I would ask questions about that in order, so I don't keep trying to make people go to a solution first. I will, so if they go, well, I'm really miserable, I go, what kind of miserable? Because maybe they don't even know what kind of miserable it is. Therefore, they don't know what the opposite is yet. They don't know what the other thing is that they want, because they've only been talking about this story at a very intellectual level. It's very headspacey. It's all up here, and it's all just wordy, wordy, words. Or it's very emotionally driven. So it's just a sense and a feel. I've just got this niggly feeling inside. And they don't really know what the niggly feeling is. So they don't know what the opposite is. And this is why when you're listening to people and you're trying to make them see a solution, you're trying to get them to be happy, the reason they can't shift is because they don't know, they don't understand what this is yet at the moment. So it's like, C is curiosity. It's like, ask questions to get them solution focused. And I generally ask 2 or 3 questions. And if in everyday conversation with somebody, if I don't have a contract with them to coach them, I don't have their permission to challenge their thinking, I would probably ask 2 or 3 questions. And then I would just check, are you comfortable with me asking you lots of questions? Because I believe if I ask you questions, you can get clarity of what you're thinking. Whereas if I keep telling you what I think, it may not be of any help to you. And I just check what the person wants. And in a friend's conversation, if my friend says, no, I just want to know what you do, Cheryl, I don't need you to coach me, which they can often say to me, then I'll give my opinion. But I'm only giving my opinion usually on a surface value. I don't really know what's happening for them. And so my opinion and my feedback is not well informed. And so I always prefer, and my friends who know me, I am naturally a coach. I want to ask questions. I want to understand what's happening from their perspective, so that when I give my opinion, it's got more relevance. It's got some information that can help. So, Kevin, you put an outcome of I have my hypnotherapy practice as my sole earnings. Okay, so what I would do when I'm working with clients is I will look at the questions. I ask you what you want to have. I say, Kevin's now got a very clear outcome. And so literally, Kevin, I would write down that sentence, and I would take each word, and I would be asking myself, if I was coaching myself, I was doing it in the journal, I'd go, what kind of have is that? What kind of my, and what kind of hypnotherapy, and what kind of practice, and what kind of as, and what kind of my, and what kind of soul, and what kind of earnings. And you will be surprised what information will come out that you didn't know was about all of that. And when you've got more clarity, then you know what your brain knows, what it's working for. Your brain knows what it's got to keep an eye out for. And when you need it and want it, you can ask other people. Because right now, if I was trying to help you, I don't know how much that is. I don't know specifically what kind of hypnotherapy you do. I don't even know where it is. I know you do those things, and I know a little bit about it, Kevin. But my point being is that when we're trying to achieve our outcomes, we often don't have enough clarity. We don't know enough about it. We're just talking about it at a very superficial level. We don't dig down and get the details to make it easy to communicate it to other people and to ourselves. And our brain isn't able to help us. It can't help us find the things that we're wanting in our life. It can't help us find the opportunities. So coaching listening has a solution focus about it. Okay, so that's the point. Now, if you are stuck in your story of what didn't work, then one of the things you can do is go, so what is working or what has worked? And it might feel really uncomfortable. It's a bit like starting a new exercise, because you won't have used these muscles before. You've got so comfortable with talking about what doesn't work. Your brain loves it because it's familiar, it's predictable, even though it's not serving you and it makes you really unhappy. It will do it because it's familiar. And so, like changing any habit or behavior, you have to decide that you're going to practice it, which is why I have the What's Working Wednesday as a reminder. But think about what is working, what has worked. Another way you can do the question for future focus, if you've got a particular thing you want, so like a hypnotherapy practice as your sole earnings, you can ask the question, if a hypnotherapy practice as your sole earnings was just the way you'd like it to be, it would be like what? And the reason why these questions are so powerful is because we have our intellectual, sort of our logical side of our brain that's doing it very much in words. And we have our creative side of our brain that's doing it in pictures. And so if we can get the two to be working in harmony with each other, and we can have the words to intellectually communicate it with other people, but we also have the pictures that help all the other senses, our emotions, our feelings, our taste, our sense, all of our senses are incorporated in the outcome, then the whole of you will be aware of it, will be bought into it. So in summary, coaching is a questioning technique that helps put your attention on what you want. And also, if you've got a very skilled coach, if you've got someone who's got a lot of experience, then what they will also do is they'll be listening for patterns. So I talk about language. The first thing we've just done with Kevin is gone, what kind of that, and picked out each word. The next thing in the process of clarity, I'll talk about attention. And so I would be paying attention to anything that changes in their language. So I will be listening to, they might have said, well, I used to have a really good hypnotherapy practice in X, Y, and Z, and it's not really happening now. And so I will go, okay, so when you used to have it, what kind of practice was that practice? So my point is I'm asking questions about stuff that sounds helpful for the person. So it might be reminding them of a past experience when they did know how to do it, they have done it, because perhaps they've forgotten, they've been talking so much about what they haven't done right. Their brain is completely deleted when they got it right, that they did know how to do it. So when you're coaching somebody and when you're listening to someone to coach them, you are purposefully asking questions about things that they do want. So you go, tell me more about this practice. Tell me more about hypnotherapy, if it was more in an everyday conversation. And you're also asking questions about things that show that they're really good at it, or evidence that they may already have, that maybe they've talked about it superficially. They're not even hearing that they're saying it, but you asking questions about it, they go, oh yeah, I have done that before, that's worked. So when I talk about clarity and confidence, basically clarity comes from asking questions. Confidence comes by asking questions about what you want, solution, and about what works for you, strengths. And it's the repetition of that process, continually putting your attention on what works, celebrating changes, that helps you to move forward. So coaching for me is the kind of listening you want and need when you are sick of your story and you really want things to change. And you will ask questions like, what would I like to have happen? What is working? What has worked? And then start asking the clean language questions that I use is, what kind of is that? Is there anything else about that? You might ask yourself, does it have a shape or size? Whereabouts is it? And the more you can, so you could literally, Kevin, go through every single one of those questions. And when I have my hypnotherapy practice, what kind of have does that have? And does that have a shape or size? And whereabouts does that have? Because if you could draw have, then you will remember it. And if you go my hypnotherapy, what kind of my is that my? You know, where is it? Does it have a shape or size? That my's like what? And it's that level of curiosity that starts to open your brain up. And what it's doing is it's taking the blood from the survival brain, because it's like, oh my God, I've got to look after stuff. And it's getting it back up into the neocortex part of the brain. It's stimulating thought. It's getting the whole of the brain working, both your left and your right side of your brain. And then what happens is your brain starts to go, oh, well, actually, yeah, there's a bit of an inkling, there's a bit of a clue here that actually it's not all doom and gloom. Well, there is some hope. And as the sort of you peel back and a bit of light comes in, that lightness actually starts to go through the whole of you. Now, for some people, it takes a bit of time to make that transition from telling the story to getting to think about and really pay attention to solutions and strengths. But that's what coaching is all about. So that really is the first part of the clarity process, CLA. So we're really looking at what we've asked questions of and where we put people's attention. Only one word of warning: if you have someone who's really talking about the problem, some people, particularly coaches, actually, when I work with coaches who they start working with a client and then they find out the client's had a massive trauma in their life, you know, something really awful's happened to them. And some coaches will say, you know, no, I can't help you with that. I'm a solution-focused person. You need to go and talk to a counsellor. So one of the things I would say to you is that you do need skill. If you're going to ask somebody about the problem, you're going to need the skills to take them into the sadness and then back out again. So you cannot just ask them for 2 or 3 minutes and then abandon them. You can't really do damage. It's because this is the story they're telling themselves. But at the moment, they're only telling you at a superficial level. And if you ask loads of questions, you might reconnect them with the real pain and the real trauma when it happened before. And whilst they've already experienced it once before, their brain has shut it off and they weren't remembering it right now. So if you are going to ask questions about problems, you do need to understand that there's training involved and there's a way of moving people out from there. And you've got to be willing to stay there with them. You've got to be willing to hold it. You can't abandon them halfway through it, because that's destroyed. That can cause damage. That's the stuff that can upset people. So if you want to listen to people, if you stay with coaching listening and you ask them what they want and you ask what's not working, and you can say to them, look, and most people avoid counselling because they don't want to relive the trauma. And it takes a skilled facilitator to put people's attention on just before the trauma and just after, and not having to relive it. There is no need, and you do not have to go through the trauma again to heal it. But you do need to remind your system right now that you are okay. And asking yourself what's working, what has worked, what would you like to have happen, and celebrating every time you make a progress towards the outcome that you want will achieve that without having to relive the trauma. So coaching listening is one of the ones that will really help your friends if you've got people that really are stuck. Now, one thing I would really like you to help me change in terms of perception of listening. What generally happens at that point when a friend has got a story or a really difficult time, and you now think, you might have remembered Cheryl says, oh, don't ask them loads of questions about the problem because you could cause more problems. So now you're not equipped to ask the questions. And what usually happens, we go say something, people will say like, oh, you need to get professional help. That's drama. That's inferring there's something wrong with that person. And what I would say to you is, if you own it and say, look, it's really important that you get this story heard, and there is a skilled way of getting you to deal with, you know, having this story honoured and moving you to a better place so you feel better about yourself. And I am not trained to do that right now. And I want to support you and I want to be able to help you. So, and you can work with that person and say, how can I best? And as long as they own it and they say, you know, just listening to me is fine, ask them what kind of listening they want. And if that you really feel they need professional help, don't say it to them as though they're broken. Let them know that you believe they need to be listened to longer than you have time for, or that you have the skill for, and that lead by example. Say to them, if you've got coaches and you've got people that listen to you, actually empowering people to say, this is normal. It's normal to have someone to listen to you, and not everybody is skilled to do it. Because it's really important that part happens. It's really important to me that we change the perception of professional listening, that we stop making people feel that they're broken and they need to get fixed. It's actually a very tough thing to do at times, to listen to things that are not working, and it takes skill and training, and I do it, and then I've got people I can talk to in order that I can bring myself back and be present for my family without being impacted by all the sadness that I hear during the course of a day. So that's just something I want to share. So I'd love to hear from you guys before I go. I do need to go at p:30 today very promptly, as I have a clarity and confidence retreat I'm running today, and clients arriving in an hour. So I'd love to hear, what do you know now? Could you please put your answers below? As a result of today's talking about coaching listening and forward focused questions and focusing on strengths and resources, things that are useful, that's now about asking questions about what you want and what works. What do you know now? What difference does knowing that make, if any? And if anything's changed for you since you started watching this video half an hour ago, could you put down what kind of change that is? Tell me about it. How will you celebrate that change? And then thinking about going forward, now you've got that, what's your plan? Now you've got that new learning, what will you do different? What kind of things will you need, what's the one thing that needs to happen every day for the next 7 days? And as always, I'd love feedback. What's worked about this video? What's not worked about the video? What would need to happen for the video to work better? Because your feedback helps me produce content that's going to be really useful and helpful to you. So what you've learned, Kevin, is to continue questioning all that you think. Fabulous, thanks for sharing that. So the question is, what difference does knowing that make? And it's lots of questions, I know, but it's like, if you don't, this is the bit I call embedding the learning, embracing the learning. Because what happens is we can learn something superficially, but it's repetition and it's repeating it. That's why people tell their stories over and over again. That's why writing a book is transformational in so many ways, because you have to write the same thing over and over again. It embeds it. And then when other people read it and they give you feedback, that embeds it as well. It's such an empowering process because it gets this repetition thing going and it embeds your learning. So thinking about, you now know that continue questioning all that you think. What difference does knowing that make? And by articulating those answers, you are reminding your critic, you're reminding your subconscious mind that questioning it is a good thing. You're reminding them what it is, what's the benefits. And so you can catch yourself, you can create those new habits. It's fab. Kevin's put, I'll finish your book and then read it again and carry out all the exercises within the next 10 days. Fabulous. Please do share in the group, Kevin, because when you interact and put in what you're doing, and if you get stuck with anything, please put it in there. I usually answer within 24 hours, Monday to Friday. I say my hours of work are from 8 till 4 on a Monday to Friday UK time. And maybe on there other times, you just can't guarantee, because I do tend to have real big switch off times. But please tell us what you're doing. Tell us which parts of the activities you're working through. I want to know. I want to help. I'm curious. I'm nosy, and it's good feedback for me. So thank you for sharing that. Lorna, you've just put, before I log off, I know now how to ask myself the in-depth questions about every thought. I'll begin doing to see what comes up. Fabulous. Well, I know you and I have a 30-minute call booked in. I can't wait to find out about that. Those of you who are on the call today, or you have heard about it, please inbox me if you'd like to book one of the free 30-minute sessions. I think I have I think it's 7 next week. I've managed to open up a diary space. I didn't know something's moved in my diary for next week. So I've got some 20-30-minute free laser sessions just to find out where you're at now. Is this the time for change? Is the way that I work the kind of thing that could help you? And if it is, if I can really, really help you, I'll give you another 60 minutes completely free, because I want to make sure that you are resourced to be the best version of you this year in 2018. Lorna, you put, I'm constantly asked to listen to others, so this is helpful. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that, for me personally, I was a professional listener. I've been doing it for 5 years. I was listening to my family, I was listening to my friends, I was listening to my clients. And when I hit the wall, which is what the story about is in my book, was actually, my husband said to me, he said, I goes, I can't believe I can do this, why can't I can't do it myself? And he went, what would you tell your clients to do? And I was like, get a coach. And it was at that point I realized that I'd been thinking, well, I know it, you know, logically, therefore I should better do it for myself. And actually I needed to go and get people to listen to me. And I'm so glad. I had coaches for some time, but because of trying to increase my profit and I wasn't making as much money as I wanted to, I cut back on the support. And actually what I did, just so we're really honest, and you know, I'm not being, is I trained Mark. Mark is a trained clean language facilitator, but actually we started a process where he would listen to me and I had his permission to say if that listening wasn't working. So he became my coach. And then when there was really complex stuff that was outside his skill set and his experience and his knowledge, I booked sessions with my trainer and my mentor and said, look, when I take my clients through this program, we model out these 6 things. Can I do that with you? Because I needed somebody that had the level that I have of pattern spotting. So there was a certain amount that my family friends could do, because I would tell my friends what I needed, ask them if I could just download, or ask them if they would ask me what, if I said, if you catch me whinging, just tell me what would you like to have happen. If you catch me really about what's not working, ask me what I'd like to, you know, what is working. If I do anything that makes you feel great, tell me about it. And I started to educate my friends and family to be my listeners. And that took time. It really did take time, but it was so worth it, because I'm now in a situation where I have quite a large resource, a support network. I still have 3 coaches right now. Okay, I have Karen, who's my collaboration partner and coach. She coaches me when I write my books, etc., and also my business. I have a mastermind group with Steve Bimpson, so I go for group coaching once a month. And I work with Nat Burnett, where I'm looking for sales coaching. And occasionally I go out for fun days, like I did with Mary Lunnon, if you haven't seen my video about Quest for Peace. And I go take a whole day out to be coached and facilitated, probably 2 or 3 times a year. So because I'm listening to everybody else, I spend and invest on time with my friends and family being listened to. It's really, really important, Lorna, that you do that. Lucy, thank you for joining us. You used a phrase which struck me. I've forgotten the exact words. I'm going to resisted that my action. I'm going to resist that my action. I don't know what you mean there, Lucy. If you were able to clarify that. You've used a phrase which struck me and I've forgotten the exact words. So my invitation would be, listen back to the video, write down the thing that struck you, and then ask yourself some questions about it. What kind of struck you? Once you've got some clarity about what it's about, ask yourself, what would you like to have happen? And I'm going to re-listen. That's your action. Got it now. So you just love technology and typing. So you're going to re-listen. Please do. And then please come back to these videos and leave your comments, because this community will thrive when we share what's worked. So Sasha came on last week and said about, she did this with her. If you can start to share live experiences, all I can ever really share is my experiences. I can sometimes share experiences with my clients, but most of the work that I'm doing right now, right in this moment with my clients, is confidential. So I have a little kind of like programming in my head that says, can't talk about that. So, and I switch off that stuff so I don't end up accidentally saying anything to anybody, because it's absolutely confidential, the content they're talking about. And it's usually some time before my clients have those transformational changes that I can start bringing client stories to the table. If you can bring your success stories to this group, then that's going to inspire other people to practice non-judgmental listening. And I truly believe that if we manage our critic, we can bring inner peace. We can bring peace to our world, our family, our network, our businesses, and that ultimately could be world peace as well. And I'd love to see that in my lifetime. So Kevin, got a chuckle. Thank you much for all your support today. It's 25 to 9. I really have to go because I've got clients arriving shortly and I need to prepare lunch. Lots of love to you all. Have a fantastic weekend. Next week, we're going to be talking about clean language coaching, which is slightly different just to traditional coaching. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit why that is, what's different. It's an extreme form of listening. And those of you who have worked with me, perhaps you could put your comments below about it and encourage people to come on the call for next week. But I want you to find out a bit more about clean language listening and how that makes it different to just ordinary traditional coaching. So that again, you're informed. You'll know that wherever you're at, so if you need to talk about your downloading story, either get friends and set them up for success and tell them, I just need to download and you don't need to worry about me, I'm okay. But I know I'll feel better if I can get this out. You can write a book about it if you want to do, or write books or journal. So that you might do story, counselling, downloading, that's one kind of listening. If you're now going, I'm sick of the story, I want to be solution focused, you can ask your friends to say, if you hear me moaning, just say, what would I like to have happen? And that will start to switch your mind, because you'll be purposely wanting to talk about what you want or what has worked or what is working. And I'm going to talk about clean language and why that is magical, why it's different to ordinary traditional coaches. If you go to an ordinary coach that's not trained in clean language, I want to talk to you next week about the differences. And I'm telling you this so that you are informed when you choose the support you decide to choose. Or if you have got friends and family who are supporting you, at least you can inform them of the questions you'd like to be asked to help you get clarity and confidence in who you are and what you want. Bye.